Our Violet Ends by Chloe Gong. Chapter 1. January 1927. The New Year in Shanghai passed with such fanfare that a sense of party still permeated the city a week later. It was the way the people moved about. The extra bounce in their toes and the twinkle in their eyes, they leaned over the seats of the Grand Theater to whisper to their companion. It was loud jazz music audible from the cabaret across the street. The cool air of handheld bamboo fans waving about in rapid color. The smell of something fried smuggled into the viewing room despite Screen One's strict rules. Marking the first day of the Gregorian calendar as a time for celebration was a Western matter, but the West had long stuck its roots into this city. The madness in Shanghai was gone. The streets had been lulled back into uproarious decadence and nights that went on, like this one, where theater-goers could watch a picture and then saunter along the Huangpu River until sunrise. After all, there was no monster lurking in the waters anymore. It had been 4 months since the monster of Shanghai died, shot to death and left to rot on a wharf by the Bund. Now the only thing civilians needed to worry about were gangsters, and the increasing number of bullet-hole-ridden corpses showing up in the streets. Juliet Kai peered over the railing, squinting down at the ground level of Screen 1. From her vantage point, she could see almost everything below, could pick out every minuscule detail along the chaos broiling under the golden light fixtures. Unfortunately, it would have been more useful if she were already down there herself, mingling with the merchant she had been sent here for, rather than staring at him from high above. Their seats tonight were the best that she could do. The assignment had been given far too last minute for Juliet to finagle something good in the thick of socializing sphere. "Are you going to be pulling that face all night?" Juliet swiveled around, narrowing her eyes at her cousin. Kathleen Lang was trailing close, her mouth set in a grimace, while the people around them searched for their seats before the picture started. "Yes," Juliet grumbled. "I have so many better things to be doing right now." Kathleen rolled her eyes, then wordlessly pointed ahead, having spotted the seats marked on their tickets. The stubs in their hands were ripped poorly after the uniformed ticket boy at the door got his top hat knocked into his eyes by the crowd surging into the portio. He had hardly a moment to recover before more tickets were waved in his face. Foreigners and rich Chinese alike sniffing their noses at the slow speed. In places like these, better service was expected. Ticket prices were sky-high to make the Grand Theater an experience. What with its arched ceiling beams and wrought iron railings, its Italian marble and delicate doorway lettering, only in English, no Chinese to be found. "What could possibly be more important than this?" Kathleen asked. They took their seats, the frontmost row by the second-level railing, a perfect view of both the screen and all the people beneath. "Staring angrily at your bedroom wall, as you have been doing these past few months?" Juliet frowned. "I have not been merely doing that." "Oh, pardon me, how could I forget screaming at politicians?" Huffing, Juliet leaned back into her seat. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, the beads along her sleeves clinking loudly against the beads dangling from her front. Grating as the sound was, it contributed only a small fraction to the general bedlam of the theater. "Baba is already giving me enough grief for upsetting that nationalist," Juliet grumbled. She started to take inventory of the crowd below, mentally assigning names to faces and keeping track of who might notice that she was here. "Don't get on my case, too." Kathleen tutted, setting her elbow onto the armrest between them. "I'm only concerned, Bayome." "Concerned about what? I'm always screaming at people." "Lord Kai doesn't reprimand you often. I think that might be an indicator of—" Juliet lurched forward. Out of sheer instinct, a gasp rose in her throat. But she refused to let it out, and instead the sound lodged itself tightly in place. An ice-cold sensation pressed up against the back of her tongue. Kathleen immediately jerked to attention, too, searching the floor below for whatever it was that drained Juliet's face utterly of blood. "What?" Kathleen demanded. "What is it? Do I call for backup?" "No," Juliet whispered, swallowing hard. The theater dimmed. Taking their cue, the ticket boy started to walk the aisles, forcing the crowd to settle for the picture. "It is only a small hiccup." Her cousin's brows were furrowed, still searching. "What is it?" Kathleen repeated. Juliet simply pointed. She watched as Kathleen followed the direction in which she was indicating, watched as a realization set in when they were both looking at one figure pushing his way through the crowd. It would appear we are not the only ones sent out here for a task. Because down on the ground level, looking like he had not a care in the world, Roma Montagov smiled and stopped in front of the merchant they were after, extending his hand for the merchant to shake. Juliet curled her fist tightly into her lap. She had not seen Roma since October, since the first protests in Nancy shook the city and set the precedent for those who were to follow when winter swept into Shanghai. She had not seen his physical person, but she had felt his presence everywhere, in the corpses littered across the city with lily-white flowers clutched in their stiff hands, in the business partners disappearing out of the blue with nary a message or explanation, in the blood feud making its mark. Ever since the city caught wind of a confrontation between Roma Montagov and Tyler Kai, the blood feud had shot back into its most terrible heights. Neither gang needed to worry about their numbers being picked off by the madness anymore. Instead, their thoughts circled retribution and honor, and as different mouths ran different accounts of what had happened between the inner circles of the Scarlet Gang and the White Flowers that day, the only definitive truths came out were this. In a tiny hospital along the edges of Shanghai, Roma Montagov had shot at Tyler Kai, and to protect her cousin, Juliet Kai had killed Marshall Seho in cold blood. Now both sides were vengeful. Now the White Flowers were pressing down on the Scarlet Gang with a renewed urgency, and the Scarlet Gang were fighting back just as hard. They had to. No matter how carefully the Scarlets cooperated with the Nationalists, every single person in the city could feel something shifting, could see the gatherings grow larger and larger each time the Communists attempted to strike. The political landscape was soon to change, soon to swallow up its way of lawlessness, and for both gangs currently ruling the city with an iron fist, it was either to be violent now and secure their holdings, or regret it later should a greater power swoop in when there was no way to win territory back. Juliet, Kathleen said softly. Her cousin's eyes shifted back and forth between her and Roma. What happened between you two? Juliet didn't have an answer to give, just as she hadn't had an answer all the other times she had asked this question. Kathleen deserved a better explanation, deserved to know why the city was saying Juliet had shot Marshall Seho point blank when she had once been so friendly with him, why Roma Montagov was dropping flowers everywhere he went in mockery of the feud's victims when he had once been so gentle with Juliet. But one more person in on the secret was one more person drugged down into the mess. One more target for Tyler's scrutiny. One more target for Tyler's guns. Better to speak none of it. Better to pretend and pretend until maybe, just maybe, there came chance to salvage the fractured state this city had fallen into. The picture is starting, Juliet said in lieu of a reply. Juliet? Kathleen insisted. Juliet gritted her teeth. She wondered if her tone still fooled anyone. In New York, she had been so good at lying, so good at playing pretend as an utterly different person. These last months had been wearing her down until there was nothing left of her but her. He's not doing anything. Look, he's taking a seat. Indeed, Roma appeared to be walking away from the merchant after a mere greeting, settling into an end seat 2 rows behind. This did not have to be a big deal. They did not need to engage in a confrontation. Juliet could quietly keep an eye on him from where she sat and make sure she approached the merchant first when intermission came. It was a surprise that she had even been sent after a merchant. The Scarlet Gang rarely chased after new clientele. They waited for clientele to come to them. But this merchant did not dabble in drugs like the rest of them. He had sailed to Shanghai last week carrying British technology. Heavens knows what kind. Her parents had not been specific in their briefing, save that it was some sort of weaponry, and the Scarlet Gang wanted to require his inventory. If the White Flowers were trying to get on to it too, then it had to be something big. Juliet made a note to ask for details as soon as she got home. The lights went dark. Kathleen glanced over her shoulder, fingers twisting into the loose sleeves of her coat. Relax, Juliet whispered. What you're about to watch came directly from its premiere in Manhattan. Quality entertainment. The picture started. Screen 1 was the largest viewing room in the whole Grand Theater, its orchestral sound booming from all sides. Each seat was equipped with its own translation system, reading out the text that appeared alongside the silent film. The couple to Juliet's left were wearing their earpieces, murmuring excitedly to each other as the lines filtered through in Chinese. Juliet didn't need her earpiece. Not just because she could read English, but because she wasn't really watching the film. Her eyes, no matter how much she tried, kept wandering down. "Don't be a fool," Juliet scolded herself. She had tipped herself into the situation at full speed. She would not regret it. It was what she had needed to be done. But still, she couldn't stop looking. It had only been 3 months, but Roma had changed. She already knew that, of course, from the reports that came back to her about dead gangsters with Korean characters slashed in blood beside them. From the bodies piling up further and further inward into Scarlet Territory lines, as if the White Flowers were testing the limits they could encroach upon. It was unlikely that Roma had sought out Scarlet's specifically for vengeance killings. He didn't have it in him to go that far. But each time a conflict erupted, the message left behind was clear. This is your doing, Juliet. It was Juliet who had escalated this feud, who had pulled the trigger on Marshal Seho and told Roma to his face that whatever happened between them had been nothing but a lie. So now all the blood left in his wake was his revenge. He looked the part, too. At some point he had traded his dark suits for lighter colors, for a cream jacket and a golden tie, for cufflinks that caught the light each time the screen flashed white. His posture was sharp. No more slouching to feign casual, no more stretching his legs long so he could slump into the chair and avoid being seen by everyone giving the room a cursory glance. Roman Montagov wasn't the heir scheming in the shadows anymore. It seemed that he was sick of the city seeing him as the one slitting throats in the dark, the one with a heart of coal and the clothing to match. He looked like a white flower. He looked like his father. A flash of movement blurred in Juliet's peripheral vision. She blinked, pulling her gaze away from Roma and searching the seats across his aisle. For a moment, she was certain she had merely been mistaken, that perhaps a lock of hair had come undone from her front curl and fallen into her eyes. Then the screen flashed white again as a shrieking train derailed in the Wild West, and Juliet saw the figure in the audience rise. The man's face was cast in shadow, but the gun in his hand was very, very illuminated, and it was pointed right at the merchant in the front row, who Juliet still needed to speak to. "Absolutely not," she muttered angrily, reaching for the pistol strapped to her thigh. The screen dropped into shadows, but Juliet took aim anyway, and the second before the man could react, she pulled the trigger first with a loud bang. Her pistol kicked. Juliet pressed back into her seat, her jaw hard as the man below dropped his weapon, his shoulder wounded. Her gunshot had hardly drawn any notice, not when there was a shooting going on the picture, too, drowning out the scream coming from the man's mouth and covering up the smoke wafting from the barrel of her pistol. Though the picture had no dialogue sound, the orchestral backing track had an uproarious cymbal clanging in the background, and the theater-goers all assumed the gunshot a product of the film. All except for Roma, who immediately swiveled around and looked up, eyes searching for the source of the gunshot. And he found it. Their gazes locked, the click of mutual recognition so forceful that Juliet felt a physical shift in her spine, like her body was finally righting itself into alignment after months out of configuration. She was frozen, breath caught in her throat, eyes pulled wide, until Roma reached into his jacket pocket and drew his gun, and Juliet had no choice but to jolt herself out of her daze. Instead of combating the would-be assassin, he had decided to shoot at her. 3 bullets whizzed by her ear. Gasping, Juliet struck the floor, her knees grazing the carpet hard as she threw herself down. The couple to her left started screaming. The theater-goers had realized the gunshots were not part of the soundtrack. "Okay," Juliet said under her breath. "He's still mad at me." "What was that?" Kathleen demanded. Her cousin dropped quickly, too, using the railing of the second level for cover. "Did you shoot into the seats? Was that Roma Montagov shooting back?" Juliet grimaced. "Yes." It sounded like a stampede was starting on the floor below. The people in the upper level were certainly starting to panic, too, hurtling out of their seats and rushing for the exit, but the 2 doors on either side of the theater, marked even and odd for the seat arrangements, were rather thin, and all they managed to achieve was a bottleneck situation. Kathleen made an indecipherable noise. "He's not doing anything. He's taking his seat." "Oh, don't mock me," Juliet hissed. This situation was not ideal, but she would salvage it. She scrambled to her feet. Someone was trying to shoot the merchant. Juliet made a quick glance over the railing. She didn't see Roma anymore. She did not see the merchant pulling his suit jacket tightly around his middle and securing his straw hat, trying to follow the crowds out of the theater. "Go find who it was," Kathleen huffed. "Your father will have your head if the merchant is killed." "I know you're joking," Juliet muttered, "but you might be right." She pressed her pistol into her cousin's hand and took off, calling over her shoulder, "Talk to the merchant for me. Merci." By now the bottleneck at the door had thinned enough that Juliet could push through, merging into the main interim outside the second floor of Screen 1. Ladies dressed in silk kipau were screaming inconsolably at one another, and British officers were clumped together in the corner to hiss hysterics about what was going on. Juliet ignored it all, pushing and pushing to get to the stairs, to get down to the ground floor where the merchant would be emerging. She skidded to a stop. The main staircase was far too crowded. Her eyes darted to the side to the main maintenance stairs, and she tore through the door without a second thought, barreling right through. Juliet was familiar with this theater. It was Scarlet territory, and she had spent parts of her early childhood wandering around this building, peering into the different screening rooms when Nurse was distracted. Where the main staircase was a grand structure of polished flooring and arched wooden banisters. The maintenance stairs were made of cement and void of natural light, relying on naught but a small bulb dangling in the middle of the landing. Her heels clacked loudly, turning the corner of the landing. She stopped short. Waiting there, by the door into the main lobby, was Roma, his gun raised. Juliet supposed she had grown predictable. "You were 3 paces away from the merchant," she said. She was surprised her voice seemed level. "Ta-ma-de." There was one knife strapped to her leg, but in the time it would take to reach for it, she would be giving Roma plenty of time to shoot. "You left him just to find me? I'm flattered." Juliet swerved with a hiss. Her cheek radiated heat, swelling from the harrowing close contact of the bullets that flew by her head. Before Roma could think to aim again, Juliet ran the quickest survey of her options, then dove through the door behind her, surging into the storage unit. She wasn't trying to escape. This was a dead end, a thin room crowded with stacked chairs and cobwebs. She only needed another bullet whizzed by her arm. "You're going to blow this place up," Juliet snapped, spinning around. She had come to the very end of the storage space, her back pressed to the thick pipes that ran along the walls. "Some of these pipes carry glass. Put a hole in one of these and the whole theater bursts into flames." Roma was hardly threatened. It was as if he could not hear her. His eyes were narrowed, his expression scrunched. He looked unfamiliar, properly foreign, like a boy who had pulled on a costume and hadn't expected how well it would fit. Even under the dim lights, the gold of his clothes glimmered, as bright as the twinkling billboards outside the theater. Juliet wanted to scream, seeing that he had been made into. She could hardly catch her breath, and she would be lying if she said it was only because of her current physical exertion. "Did you hear what I said?" Juliet eyed the distance between them. "Put that gun away." "Do you hear yourself?" Roma interrupted. In 3 strides, he was close enough to point his gun right in Juliet's face. She could feel the heat of the barrel, hot steel an inch away from her skin. "You killed Marshall. You killed him, and it's been months, and I haven't heard a word of explanation from you." "There's no explanation." He thought her a monster. He thought she hated him the whole time so viciously that she would destroy everything he loved. And he had to think that, if he had to keep his life. Juliet refused to drag him down just because she was weak-willed. "I killed him because he needed to die," Juliet said. Her arm whipped up. She twisted Roma's gun away, letting it clatter to their feet. "Just as I will kill you. Just as I will not stop until you kill me." He slammed her into the pipes. The effort was so forced that Juliet tasted blood inside her lip, sliced by her own sharp teeth. She stifled a gasp and then another when Roma's hand tightened around her throat, his eyes murderous. Juliet was not frightened. If anything, she was only resentful. Not at Roma, but at herself, at wanting to lean in while Roma was actively trying to kill her. At this distance between them that she had willingly manufactured, because they had been born into 2 families at war, and she would rather die at Roma's hand than be the cause of his death. No one else is dying to protect me. Roma had blown up a whole house of people to keep Juliet safe. Tyler and his Scarlet men would go on a rampage in the name of defending Juliet, even if they too wanted her dead. It was all one and the same. It was the city, divided by names and colors and turfs, but somehow bleeding the exact same shade of violence. "Go on," Juliet said with effort. She didn't mean it. She knew Roma Montagov. He thought he wanted her dead, but the fact of the matter was that he never missed, and yet he had. All those bullets, embedded into the walls instead of Juliet's head. The fact of the matter was that he had his hands around her throat, and yet she could still breathe. She could inhale past the rot and the hate, and his fingers tried to press into her skin. Juliet finally reached for her blade, just as Roma shifted forward, perhaps intent on his kill. Her hand closed around the sheath beneath her dress, and she pulled the weapon free, slicing down on whatever came in contact with first. Roma hissed, releasing his hold. It was only a surface cut, but he cradled his arm to his chest, and Juliet followed close, leveling the blade to his throat. "This is Scarlet territory." Her words were even, but it took everything in her to keep them that way. "You forget yourself." Roma grew still. He stared at her, utterly unreadable at that moment, drew long enough that Juliet almost thought he would surrender. Only then Roma leaned into the blade instead, until the metal was pressed right into his neck, one hair's breadth away from breaking skin and drawing blood. "Then do it," Roma hissed. He sounded angry. He sounded pained. "Kill me." Juliet did not move. She must have hesitated for a fraction too long, because Roma's expression morphed into a sneer. "Why do you pause?" he taunted. The taste of blood was still pungent inside her mouth. In a blur, Juliet flipped the blade into its blunt end and slammed the handle to Roma's temple. He blinked and dropped like a rock, but Juliet threw the weapon away and lunged to break his fall. As soon as her hand slid around him, she let out a small exhale of relief, stopping Roma just before his head would hit the hard floor. Juliet sighed. In her arms, he felt so solid, more real than ever. His safety was an abstract concept when he was at the distance, far from the threats that her Scarlet posed to him. But here, with his pulse thudding through his chest and beating an even rhythm into hers, he was just a boy, just a bloody, beating heart that could be cut out at any moment by any blade sharp enough. "Why did you pause?" Juliet mimicked bitterly. Softly, she set him down, brushing his muscled hair out of his face. "Because even if you hate me, Roma Montagov, I still love you."